Hello, today we are diving into the Massillon Law Department and their vision for 2023.
I'm a communications technician.
I am Terry Curry, Communications Supervisor. I oversee our 911 Emergency Dispatch Center. Our dispatchers are the calming voice on the other end of the line during someone's worst moment. We answer that call day in and day out anytime someone needs us, and we ensure help arrives. Whether walking a caller through CPR during a medical emergency or simply staying on the phone so they are not alone, we are always there.
Learn more on how you can join our team today and be the difference. Welcome to On Our Watch. I'm your Stark County Sheriff, George Maier. Joining me today is Massillon City Law Director, Justin Richard. Welcome, Justin, to our program today, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Sheriff.
Well, Justin, I know that our viewers are interested to hear a little bit about who Justin Richard is. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be at the Massillon Law Department.
Well, I'm originally from Muncie, Indiana, and I graduated undergraduate with a criminology degree from Ball State University. During college, I worked in the area of corrections, and after graduation, I moved to Florida and worked for the state of Florida, where I was a criminal intelligence analyst and an investigator for the state of Florida. Shortly after that, I applied to law school. I went to Ohio Northern, where I then met my wife, who's from Northeastern Ohio.
Well, great. Well, glad to have you in the community. I know, Justin, that you live in the city of Massillon, and I know you've taken roots here, so to speak. I won't say you're a fan of, you are a fan of the Tigers. I know you are a fan of the Tigers because I've seen you support them. So we're always happy in Massillon to have another Tiger fan. Now, the position of law director. First of all, tell us what that position is. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So law director, it is confusing, Sheriff. Sometimes people don't, not every jurisdiction and certainly not every state has a law director. What a law director is, it's a municipal position where it's really split down the middle, and you have half criminal side, so you have your traditional prosecutor role where the state prosecutes cases that are investigated by law enforcement. Then you have the civil side where cities, the municipality is a party to civil actions. I also represent the city in those matters.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the criminal side, where agencies bring you criminal charges that you have you and your staff oversee and take those to prosecution. So what agencies do you represent in Stark County?
Every agency that would do business in the Massillon Municipal Court. There are 11 jurisdictions geographically, but there are also other agencies, state agencies that are not particularly tied to a geographic area. So we have all the way up from North Lawrence and Canal Fulton all the way down to Wilmot and Beach City. We also have, we'll get for review cases from the Department of Tax, Department of Ethics, any state department, also including here in Massillon, we have 2 state jurisdictions with the State Hospital, Heartland, and also with Indian River Juvenile Facility.
Right, so there's can be a pretty busy day for you from time to time.
It would encompass, from last I've seen, about 130,000 people.
Wow. Well, I will tell you, I know that you represent us in my office, the men and women from the Stark County Sheriff's Office. We have countywide jurisdiction, but we utilize a number of courts. But when we're in Western Stark County, when we're in the Massillon Court District, you represent our cases. Can you go through, maybe name some of the agencies so our viewers here, you know, like I know you represent us. What other agencies, local agencies, do you represent?
Well, certainly we represent Massillon Police Department in both the criminal aspect and then also civilly if they were to be sued. That's where the civil responsibilities end, but the criminal extends to Jackson, I believe I said Lawrence Township, Perry Township. We also have your 2 jurisdictions, which are Paris and Bethlehem Township. I might be missing one.
Well, we have Osnaburg, and yes, there's a couple others.
There's a small portion of Osnaburg as well. I know I'm forgetting somebody. Navarre, Brewster, and I previously named the other 2 southern districts. I think I may have got them all there.
So so you have a lot of folks that you have to answer to or help out. I know that you respond to all these agencies to help them in the prosecution of their cases. So, what does that look like as it relates to your staffing?
Well, our staff, we do have, as you are aware, we have a 24-hour prosecutor hotline that's available for all law enforcement any time of the day, any week, any emergency, that we have a prosecutor available to speak to law enforcement officers to be able to assist them while they're on this scene. Our typical cases, I would say, would come from a fresh arrest. So for your audience, what that means, a person commits a crime, there's enough evidence, probable cause at the scene for the law enforcement officers to arrest the person for that charge. They are arraigned within 48 hours. One of my staff members will be at the arraignment to make sure that there are certain conditions of bond, whether it's a no contact, if it's a violent case, whether there's appropriate bond amount set. And then the case would either proceed to a pretrial if it's a misdemeanor, or it would come to me if it's a felony preliminary hearing.
Well, Justin, there's a lot that goes into preparing a case, and just specifically if there are related to the law, if there are issues, like you said, you mentioned domestic violence, there are certain things that have to be done in preparation for a case. And so I'm guessing your staff keeps pretty busy with that.
We do, Sheriff. As you know, we actually have a full-time domestic violence unit at Massillon Municipal Court. We've been lucky enough to have that for a number of years, and we're given a federal grant for that, for which we apply every year. We have 3 great victims advocates. One is on loan from the county prosecutor, and 2 from Domestic Violence Project Incorporated. They work around the clock to work with those victims of domestic violence, certainly first and foremost to make sure that they are safe, and 2, to get justice and prosecution for the victim.
That's great. We're glad to have that in place. We need to make sure that we support those victim rights through our victim advocates. Now, Justin, you had mentioned that you have somebody on call 24/7, 365 for law enforcement in the field. So, if an example, if there's a serious crime that occurs, or even if officers need a warrant in the middle of the night, they can contact you guys. How's that work?
Yes, we're available, and actually, Sheriff, I'll tell you that I'm available. I put myself on that list. So once a week, every about 6 weeks, I could receive a phone call in the middle of the night, and they may need a search warrant, arrest warrant. We'll wake up, we'll come down to the clerk's office, we will go in front of a judge, we'll get that sworn out, we'll get it clerked, and be able to assist the police officers in their investigation.
Well, I think that's great, because I've got to tell you, I've been in this business over 40 years. And to have a prosecutor's office that's willing to be available when law enforcement gets into maybe a tricky situation or something that they need legal guidance from their prosecutor, it's great to have that resource. So we applaud you for doing that, and we hope you continue that.
Thank you.
You know, what attracted you to your current position? How did you end up, going in this direction?
You know, Sheriff, I've always been interested in criminal justice, criminology, and basically I wanted to be a public servant. And so that's what I've dedicated over 20 years of my life to being a public servant, specifically in the realm of criminal justice areas.
Well, that's great, and we need good public servants like that, because I think sometimes people get into positions of leadership and as public servants, and they forget that the people we serve are the people in our community. So it's great to have somebody with an open mind like that really keeps that paramount in what you do. You know, I know you've been at the Massillon Law Department for a minute now, and you're looking forward to the future. For those who may not know, can you explain the structure of the law department?
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, we essentially have 2 divisions, and one is civil, and we have recently built that up considerably to what it was in the past. We also have a criminal division, and they, of course, man our 2 municipal courtrooms, and they hear all the misdemeanor cases. They try them if that is necessary at that point.
I know you're very closely situated with the Massillon Police Department, and so kind of walk us through, what your relationship is with the police department, how you support them, and how you work together to keep Massillon residents safe.
Absolutely. Certainly, I work with all my police departments, but Massillon being the home team, I do work with them very closely. But my background, Sheriff, being in law enforcement, I make myself available to all law enforcement agencies. I believe that that is the key to a safe community, is police, prosecutors, working together in order to ensure that safety for our public. I often meet with the chiefs of police when it comes to internal memorandums that they may have as far as legal issues, as far as operating procedures that they want to put forth. I'm always in the air for them to bounce ideas off of.
Well, I know it's a challenging job as laws continue to change. How do you maintain your being current with your staff? And certainly, I know we'll talk in our second segment a little bit about how you help us in law enforcement, but how do you keep your staff current on emerging trends, or not even emerging trends, but so much as, you know, legal updates?
Sure. Well, I'll work reverse there. So the emerging trends, your office has put on an intelligence seminar, or excuse me, more of a coordination unit, and many jurisdictions meet. So certainly for emerging trends and the investigative portion of it, either myself or somebody from my office attends those. But as far as the updates on law, and we've had several recently, including the way that firearms have been handled and the laws concerning them now, we do have to stay up to date with current legislation that's coming out of Columbus. So we have our civil department that works on that primarily.
Well, and I think that's important because, you know, we do see ever-changing legislation as it relates to specific things. And as you mentioned, firearms is one of them that's been paramount last year. There were a lot of changes in the law related to firearms. I will tell you, and I think for the sake of conversation with our viewers today, you work with us very closely in our training center, and you help us. When I say us, I mean law enforcement in Stark County with not the emerging trends as much as the legal updates.
Absolutely.
As laws change and law enforcement officers try to stay abreast of these changes, it sometimes becomes challenging. So talk to us about your commitment to helping us with legal updates.
Sheriff, I absolutely agree with you, and I think that a safe police force is an educated one. And as you said, there are many trainings that we utilize here in the Massillon Training Center that's ran by you and your office. And we do yearly updates, not only with sheriff's deputies, and but also I know that other jurisdictions that don't even come to our municipal court, i.e. North Canton and others, have benefited from that. So it is important for us to make sure that our guys on the front line know the law as best as they can.
Well, I think you described really what a good public servant is. You said, well, we even help out people in other jurisdictions that are not under our umbrella. And I think that's a definition of a good public servant, because we want everybody to be, to serve the communities with their best foot forward. And while they're able to do that by having that education and awareness of changing law, so we appreciate you doing that. And I know you're going to continue that with us well into the future, so we're happy to have that, and we're happy to have your staff. Tell us a little bit about how many people you have on your staff. You have a huge undertaking, and I know the answer to this already, but I want our viewers here. Tell us a little bit about the size of your staff.
This may be the first time that I realized the numbers, but I told you earlier we serve about 130,000 people, and we have 13 people on our staff. Wow. So obviously that math fits in there nicely or not nicely as you look at it. Yeah. But we've got our work cut out for us. But I will tell you that we started out. 5 years ago is when I first came to Massillon and started working as the chief prosecutor. And at that time, the law director was part-time. So certainly with trends, we go through about 4,000 cases a year, Sheriff, just criminal and traffic at the Massillon Municipal Court. So it does put us to the test, but I assure you it's a task that we take on with a smile.
That's good. We appreciate that. Another good sign of a good public servant. Listen, I want to remind everybody in our viewing audience, we're hiring. It takes a team to keep Stark County safe, and requires positions we have positions available like dispatchers, deputies, corrections officers, clerks, and more. We have a variety of open positions that just may be perfect for you. Please contact us if you're interested in a job.
I'm Major C.J. Stantz. Serving as a deputy includes a variety of duties. The job is challenging, always changing, and truly rewarding.
I am Terry Curry, Communications Supervisor. Our dispatchers are the calming voice on the other end of the line during someone's worst moment. We are always there.
I'm Lieutenant Jeff Beck. Being a corrections officer isn't easy. The job is tough and it tests you every day. Every officer that works in our jail is making a difference.
I'm Sheriff George Maier. Learn more on how you can join our team today and be the difference. Welcome back to On Our Watch. I'm your Sheriff, George Maier. Hey, today we have Justin Richards from the Massillon Law Department. He's the Massillon Law Director, and we're talking about what it takes to run the law department in the city of Massillon with about 130,000 residents to oversee and be in charge of, or not even be in charge of, make sure that they're safe. Justin, as we get back into our second segment, I just wanted to talk a little bit about it's important that your office has a separation between who they represent and who they don't represent. And so I want to talk a little bit about who you actually don't represent. There are private parties, and so what's your obligation to private parties as it relates to what we talked about in the first segment, your obligation to our community of law enforcement?
Sure, Sheriff. So we represent the city of Massillon both in criminal and civil legal cases and legal disputes. What we do not represent is we are not an attorney for, unfortunately, I wish we could be, but we are not, where I'm unable to give individual legal advice to the citizens of Massillon. So, and in often cases, there's a good reason for that, because their interests may be divergent from the city for which I represent, or the department. Opposing interests, so they need to get their own legal representation when they come to see you. Yes, sir. That's a fair way of putting it. And there's a clear separation in that. And I know a lot of times people will come into your office and ask for advice, and you kindly have to tell them that you're not able to give them advice. Right? I hate it because it's in my spirit and my staff's spirit to always help whenever we can. Sure. But unfortunately, the rules are against that. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as we come out of the COVID, in the last couple of years have been very stressful on all Americans all across this country. Needless to say, your job and the job of your staff, there's a lot of responsibility. And we always like to talk about wellness. So tell us a little bit about what Justin Richards does to decompress. What kind of gets you to step away for a minute and keep things rolling in the direction you need them to roll? Absolutely. As I mentioned before, my wife is also an attorney. She is a federal government attorney. And we have a general rule that when we come home, we do not talk about work. There's certainly enough around the house, and I'm going to let you in a little secret, Sheriff. My wife and I, when we moved to Massillon, the city of champions, home of the Tigers, we brought somebody with us. We brought a 4-year-old English bulldog. And you may be saying that that's McKinley Bulldogs, our rival, and maybe some sort of a conflict. But I looked into the rules, and I am not allowed to have a tiger, Sheriff. So when I come home... That's great to know. I'm glad you know. No if I ever stop by your house, I know that a tiger is not going to come to the door. Just a bulldog, and he's sheepish. But I will tell you, something as simple as when I come home and playing with him, feeding him, those kind of pressures that we see daily, they kind of melt away. Yeah, that's great. That's great to have that disconnect. And I know you're a sports fan. You like watching different sports, and I think all those things are things you have to keep on your list to check off to honestly keep your sanity with the job that you guys do. Tell me a little bit about how you ensure that your staff are taking care of their wellness, making sure that they stay well. Well, the City of Massillon does offer a program, Sheriff, where all city employees are allowed to have a free rec membership. And there at the Massillon Recreation Center, there's everything from swimming, they can bring their families, there's a child area with lots of fun pirate ships, workout facilities, jogging, or just even a pickup game of basketball. That's a great benefit for Massillon City employees. We've been to the rec center. It's a fantastic place. There's a lot to do there. You can start at the very basics of fitness and go to the extremes because there's so much there to do. So that's great that you guys have that in your toolkit to be able to have that available to you.
Well, I need to ask you, because you are very passionate about what you do. And I just need to ask you, what do you love the most about your job?
Sheriff, prior to moving to Massillon, I've always lived in Stark County since graduating from law school, but I lived in Plain Township, and I worked for over a decade for the Summit County Prosecutor's Office, prosecuting absolutely the worst criminals in Summit County and the worst things a human could do to another human. And although I got an incredible experience trying death penalties in cases like those, there was really a disconnect for me because I didn't live in the community, or maybe it was so big. But the biggest reward for me is when I'm in Massillon, I'm affecting those people in my community, where I live, in my city. You see them over and over. Sometimes I don't remember the faces or the names or the stories, but they tell me how either myself or my office has helped them, and that truly is a great reward. I had a law school professor, Sheriff, that said half of you that become attorneys will eat well and half of you will sleep well. Well, I can tell you I got a good night's sleep last night.
That's good. That's good. That's good to know. Well, I will tell you, in asking you that question, I have to go to the other side of the spectrum and say, what's the most challenging? What's the thing that you probably dislike or most challenging for you?
Dislike, I can tell you, Sheriff, I'm frustrated, and it's certainly something that has touched our community and touched you, and it's mental health, and as it's crept into the criminal justice system. I know that you and I both belong to the Community Corrections Board, and certainly that is one of our hot topics that we're trying to figure out. And certainly you've made great strides at the jail to get those with mental health needs satisfied and not necessarily, maybe reduce or push that punishment, the punitive aspect away,
Sure.
and really treat persons that need mental health as opposed to incarceration.
Right.
It's frustrating because I don't believe currently the way that the health department has the situation set up is the best. I think we're all moving forward in the right direction, but it's those individuals that sometimes, despite how hard we try, we cannot reach.
Well, I think you're right, and I share some of your frustration, as you know, and I've spoke on this before. But there seem to be some very, very blurred lines between the criminal justice system and the mental health structure in our country, and certainly we are the recipients of that right here in Stark County. And I will tell you that, and I've probably told you this before, but this is a good forum to speak of this. I think that sometimes we have people that are in the criminal justice system who suffer from mental health issues who should not be in the criminal justice system. Finding the right answer to that is the challenge, and I think we all, like as you said, we've made some great strides. We can continue to work towards that. I know a couple of judges have tagged me for for saying that the Stark County Jail sometimes is considered the largest mental health facility in the county. Well, I say that sometimes with tongue in cheek. I certainly experience that day to day, and we know we need our folks that are out there prosecuting their case, folks like you and your staff, and our other prosecutors across the county to understand those blurred lines, and we need to try to separate some of those things from time to time. I know earlier you mentioned that you work with other agencies besides just the local law enforcement agencies. I want to talk about that a little bit before we close. I know you work with the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and I know they're probably a pretty good part of what you guys do each and every day. Talk to me a little bit about that relationship.
Sure. Lieutenant Shirkey, who's the post commander at our local Post 76, often we have great lines of communication. So he, whether it's training his subordinates to be better troopers, or whether it's changes in the law, I think that the success that we've had with the Ohio State Patrol has been because of the open lines of communication and the willingness of the patrol to work with our office.
Sure, and that's great. You got to have that relationship. I know you also work with an organization that a lot of people, they kind of stay under the radar. and that's Stark Parks. They have their own police agency, and we have a number of parks all throughout the county, but specifically we have parks right here and trails right here in western Stark County. So talk to me about that relationship.
Sure. We, Stark Parks do have sworn officers, as you mentioned, and unfortunately there are crimes either in our parks, the adjacent parking lots rather, where people jog, go on hikes. They sometimes, there'll be car vandalism or thefts from cars. So we certainly work with those rangers, and unfortunately, I'll put in a little plug. I lost my chief counsel to Stark Park, so they gained a fantastic attorney in Bill Bartos, who's now their chief counsel for the parks.
Yeah, well, you know, good for Bill. We're sorry for you, and I know that we all experience that. As we come to a close in our program today, tell me a little bit about what your vision is for the future of the Massillon City Law Department.
You know, with the landscape, and I touched on it briefly, that we do about 4,000 either criminal or traffic cases. It's increasing, Sheriff. So with those times, we have to be fluid and change with them. And I think in one aspect that probably means to grow the office to deal with the numbers. But it's also to stay on top of the trends and not get blinded into just the pursuit of justice, but like we talked about with mental health, maybe attacking, and also with substance abuse, attacking the causes of these crimes to hopefully that we can get people on a different path.
Well, I know there's a saying that if you continue to do the same thing over and over, that's kind of the definition of insanity, and you don't get any different results, right? And so we appreciate the fact that you're open-minded, you're willing to look at things a little bit differently through a different lens, if you will, and to have certainly the wherewithal within your staff and yourself to make changes, to make our community safer. Because really, you know, as I bring you in here today, that's really what it's all about. So we applaud you and your team for doing that. We thank you, and thank you for being on with us today.
Thanks for having me, Sheriff.
To our guest today, Massillon City Law Director Justin Richard, we thank him and his team for the job that they do. And to the members of our community, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments about this show or past shows or topics you'd like to see discussed in the future, please email me. I'm your Stark County Sheriff, George Maier, and this is On Our Watch.